Good morning. This will be a little video about the barley. I feel we have a lot to talk about. And, I was thinking starting into this video how sad it is for me that people just come by and they want to know, is the barley Abib? What's the barley doing? Have you, just those little quips to demand information without caring about the process. What I do with the barley is I like to tell people exactly what it looks like, exactly what to expect, exactly what I'm seeing. What I am saying to you is I want you to care about the process that the barley goes through, about the earth here in Israel. I'm trying to connect you with what I see because it does belong to you. If you're a believer in Yeshua, then you're grafted into the Commonwealth of Israel. End of story. This is Israel. Barley and the 7 species that make up the calendar grow in Israel. Therefore, since this is your spiritual home and you're not here, the best that I can do is try to connect you emotionally and paint you and show you pictures of what's happening as we approach the beginning of the year. I think you need to be able to answer for your faith. And so we're going to do this, even though I know that a lot of the people that show up at this time of the year just demanding information don't really care. They just want information so they can make a plan. So, on to the barley. Um, there's not been a change really in the barley for quite a while because I haven't looked at the numbers, but just from what I have experienced by living here, I believe we have had significantly more rain at the end of the rainy season than we did at the beginning of the rainy season. And what I've witnessed that it caused this year was it caused the barley to come out early when we had the first significant rain. And then during those about 3 to 4 weeks, when the rain ceased, then everything went dormant. Everything used whatever moisture it had just to hang on. And in some cases, in my area especially, I have seen where the grasses that came up didn't make it. They didn't hang on. They turned brown. So that long stretch truly affected the development of the barley. Now, still in grass, the rains have returned and it has been very cold and very wet. So I'm trying to paint you a story. I'm trying to give you understanding. The earth in Israel is mostly rocky, even under the domestic fields that look like they're not rocky. They have new topsoil, but as soon as they scrape back that topsoil to build a new housing addition, it's apparent what a rocky field that would be if they hadn't made those years of topsoil. So the earth in Israel is clay and rock. Clay and rock. Even under the domestic fields, there's probably about 4 to 5 inches of topsoil. And then you get down to the clay and rock. That's important because clay holds moisture for a very long time. And it is probably why, for the 4 weeks we did not get rain, that any of the barley survived at all. So now we have had really, without going back and looking at my dates, pretty close to a month of regular heavy rain. Guess what the barley is doing that had not yet put on fruiting heads? Right now, the barley is still growing very, like behind me, very tall grass because there's rain. That is the condition that I'm seeing. I have done unusual things this year. because of the way the weather has been at the end of the year. I will say in the years that I have been here, it has not been usual to have heavy rains at the end. It's usual to have heavy rains at the beginning of the rainy season. And so, because we're talking about getting into fields that in 4 or 5 steps, your feet, each foot weighs about 10 pounds because of the glom that hangs onto it, or because when you step out, our clay is literally like ice. Once it's wet, I've done it. I've done it. Okay, so I'm talking about what I know. Once it's wet, it feels like ice, and your feet are very unstable. It makes it very hard to inspect and do things that need to be done. So this year, I've done the unusual. I have traveled the trains. I have traveled them all over Israel just to look at the land to see how it's developing because I need to get into the wild areas. Well, luckily, our train system doesn't always run right along the road, and it's far enough away from the road that you can really see in that no man's land between the villages and the bypass where there's a lot of open or domestic fields and little wild spaces in between. So having done that, I can tell you, I believe I have found the earliest part of Israel this year. Um, it would be where the weather told us, and I found this out coincidentally, it's where the weather told us that we had early on 80% of the rain when the rest of the nation had suffered so severely. And that would be south of Haifa, north of Hadera, and a little east. There's a line that went through there, through that area, that I actually have found some barley out of the blade with its fruiting head. I need to go back and investigate that more as time gets closer. But for the rest of the nation, the general condition that I am witnessing and witnessing to you is that there are no fruiting heads on the barley. Found some roadside barley not far from the Jordan Valley checkpoint. I'm well aware of that area. I don't think there was no photos this year again that I didn't teach him where to look, and this area was one of them. That's a wild card, and I want to get into this. That's a wild card for me because I require more barley concentrated. I require to be able to put the sickle into the grains and cut a complete omer of barley. And an omer of barley is actually going to be quite a bit of area. We'll get into that here in a minute. So that's what I require. Now, it doesn't require that. What they don't have, in my opinion, they don't have a clear roadmap other than just somewhere to be able to take a bunch of barley and end up with an omer. And I say that because we went through this last year. The area where he declared an omer, at the time he declared it, was only 50%. And that's not a realistic critical thinking plan, because if we're talking about not replicating what would be, but what would have been, but understanding what would have been, there's no farmer in Israel that would throw away 50% of his crops that was meant to feed his family in order to take an omer. You're talking about destroying as much barley that would feed your family as you would be collecting to create that omer. And Elohim, that would be a curse. Elohim would not curse you to make you get the omer of barley in time for wave sheaf, by cursing you by causing you to lose 50% of your grains. Even if that wasn't your entire area that you were growing barley, that's a curse. That's not a blessing. So I am looking for a cohesive omer of barley that can be harvested. So before we get into that, now let's jump over and look at what we're facing in the coming days as far as weather. This is where we are today. And I translated this for you so it'll be easier for both of us. A freezing morning in the mountains, -1 Celsius, at -1.5 Celsius in the Golan Heights. So that's to the east of us here towards Syria. 0 in Safat, that's to the north of us here, just not very far. Less than 2 degrees in Jerusalem. In the north, it seems to be no precipitation at all. That's where I am. And it does look like it's going to be a clear day. But there's still mud because we're still having snow in the elevations. In Jerusalem, there's not going to be any rain, but evidence of snow has fallen. Flakes have fallen. Heavy rain in the southern coast, it seems like from south of Jerusalem, the Judean mountains, all the way to the south, that we're in for an interesting amount of precipitation. And you remember earlier in the year, I went south to see what the condition was because of the drought. So there were no there were no fruiting heads on the blades of wild barley down there. There was a cache of little tufts in some places, but for the majority of the people who look at barley, it's a joke to talk about those in light of looking for an omer. So what's the weather going to be for the time we have left in the next several days? Well, if you look here, this is probably going to be tomorrow, or Monday actually. This is probably going to be our coldest night of the year. But look at Saturday, look at Friday. As soon as this weather system gets out of our area, the temperatures start rising drastically. I've always told you, if it's raining, and I should add now this year snowing, if it's raining or snowing, it's cold. If it's not, and immediately when this weather system gets out of here, the temperature starts rising. If it's not, then it's hot. We need the hot to dry the clay. We need the water that the clay is holding to begin to run away from the plants in the little elevations in the wild fields. And even I will tell you, I will take barley or wheat on a hillside. It is a fable that the Jewish person who inherited land and inherited what he inherited wouldn't have grown wheat or barley in it if there were elevations or slants, or that's a fable. That's a fable. You had to feed your family. So we need this warm, as it were, because with the warm comes the drying of the earth, and with that also comes the running away of the water from the little elevations. And you'll see, if you've noticed, when you look across Israel in the barley inspections, that those higher areas always ripen first. So this is a good thing. I don't know, and I'm not going to guess what that's going to translate into in the short time we have left. Again, there is one location that I found early on that does have barley with fruiting heads. There will be further investigation into that general area, and that looks like poking around on the back roads for a wild field that would represent an omer of barley. Have not been able to do that yet. It's a little hard to see in the rain as you're going down the road and looking for new areas. But if this weather holds as this is, it's going to be much easier. And so that is what we're looking at. That's what I'm seeing. The earth is beautiful and lush, and it's just the most beautiful color of dark emerald green you have ever seen. I just love this time of year, but it to this point has no areas that are showing signs of going into a fruiting head. Once that happens, that emerald green begins to diminish and it looks more like the grass behind me. It starts to pick up a little dullness because it's starting to reach the end of its cycle. I will give updates. If you want personal barley information, if you reach out to me with questions about personal barley information, I don't give that. Um, there's no time for that in this season. I will redirect you to places like YouTube, Facebook, where I put things up as they become available. Once we see barley with heads getting close to the correct condition, you will find I make a lot more updates. But making an update daily and saying there's no barley, folks, gets to be a little monotonous. You have to trust the process. I'm not a newbie. I don't slack on my job. I'm not irresponsible. Silence simply means there's nothing going on. Now, just to get everybody on the same page, I want to look how much land volume is needed to make up an omer of barley. Now, this is not to be a Nazi and go out and measure and make sure you've got an omer of barley, but this is to educate you, to give you a feeling of what and how much land an omer would take. So in Wikipedia, it tells us that an omer is about a gallon. I'm going to say a gallon. And then we look at this in everygoodgrain.com, and they tell us that 1 acre is generally 1.2 tons of barley. And then we look at another calculator, and we learn that 1.4 tons, sorry, I think I said 1.2, but it is 1.2, 1.24, is 556 gallons. So this is an acre, 556 gallons, and an omer is a gallon. So 1 acre is 550 gallons. Now the area of an acre is 43,560 square feet. So we will divide that by 550 gallons because we only need 1 gallon to make an omer. And we find that 79 square feet is an omer. So if we are not taking something that is very close to 100% Abib, and although we're not trying to replicate, we're not actually trying to go through the process of the first century time of bringing in the barley, we need to understand what it meant to them. Anything less than almost 100% Abib in 79 square feet takes food out of the mouth of a family. So when I go look for barley, I'm looking for at least 80 square feet in a wild area of barley. And within that, there could be mustard, there could be thistles, there could be things in that field that would take up some of that area with things other than barley. And so I hope this helps you in your understanding when you hear people talk about having enough for an omer. It should represent at least 80 square feet of solid Abib barley. Or if you're only going to take it at 50% and throw the rest away, 160 square feet. And this is for your education. I hope that you will watch the other inspectors as they do this and watch it with this knowledge that I literally am trying to give to you, so that not so many of you people just want information, so that some of you people are actually looking at what is being shown and understand what is being shown from a very practical and scriptural point of view.
Very early on this year, I had seen some wild barley while I was traveling by train for a dental appointment. And I had gone back to the area to see about the barley because from the train and the perspective of my travel, it looked as if two domestic fields were divided by an area of wild barley. I did see that it was wild barley standing over a domestic field of grains that were not did not wear their fruiting head. So you can't really say at that point if the domestic grains the barley was standing above was barley or wheat. So as it turned out, I spent most of that first visit to the area trying to locate where I had seen this. As far as I was concerned, it was a one-off location I had seen from the train. There was a lot more territory between the train tracks and the nearby village than there appeared to be from train travel when I was going by, and it took me quite a bit of time to finally understand where I had seen that when I was traveling by train. And I will say that this appeared to be a one-off situation, not even really from the fact that it was in the domestic grains, but the fact that there was barley of that quantity and that dense. I had not seen it. At this point, the Jordan Valley checkpoint was sparse and there was really nothing to speak of at all. But in this area from the train, this could viably have been enough for an omer and thick enough that it could be gathered from one location. And so that's why this was a one-off. It was a very early appearing of barley. So yesterday, February the 25th, I went back and I spent the day really looking for any area that would have wild barley in an independent field, independent from any domestic grains. First of all, this area is beautiful, wonderful agriculture. The grains there are beautiful, but it is not nearly the size of the Jezreel Valley or that northern Negev area where they have so much space and there's endless opportunities for not only fields but wild areas. This was right outside of Pardes Hana, and it was kind of, in some cases, along the Highway 4. So there were villages and there were, for the area, for the size of the area, there was a lot of agriculture, but the size of the area was not nearly as big as, like I said, the Jezreel Valley or the northern Negev. So to spend the day looking for places of wild barley as just one person looking wasn't as difficult as it sounds. It did take the better part of my time. I did go to several villages, but I also did explain before that even within this area that I'm talking about, this agricultural area, there was a strong line through that area of early barley. And you may remember from past years of looking for barley that there's always this one line, Berry to Raim, in that area there that's always just a little earlier due to many reasons. It's a little ecosystem of its own. Well, this was a little ecosystem of its own. And try as I may, I could not find any dedicated wild areas that had barley, wild barley. Those fields were end to end, whether it was end to end with grains or end to end with grapes or butted up against Ramon pomegranate trees. It didn't matter. That land is so rich and so fertile and beautiful that they used every bit of it. But I just want to share some photos with you from that time. And by the way, I won't be going back there because I couldn't find any wild spaces I couldn't find any place that held barley that we could look at and use to begin the year. I did need to go investigate this totally because it is the earliest barley in all of Israel in this area. It's later, it's more mature than what we see at Jordan Valley checkpoint. Okay, here we go. This is the barley, how it looked in the area. Almost every field was covered at least partially with wild barley. I mean, seeing wild barley standing above the domestic grains was common. It was not common to see a clean field. And so you can kind of see, traveling by train, as thick as the barley is in this area, how it could look like you were looking at wild areas of barley. But if you will look with me all through this photo, all through this area, there is wild barley in the domestic grains. And another thing is if you will look, you will see that they're already starting to lay over pretty well in here, because this barley had, I saw it the first time 3 weeks ago. And it's beautiful. That is beautiful wild barley, but it is just not usable. Now on this slide we're looking at a field there, and it's covered in it's a domestic field covered in oats. So sorry. It's a little harder to tell, but maybe I can blow this up. The wild oats have a scattered head. I don't know if you can see that it's scattered, and it's not a single stalk. Here you go. It doesn't finish as a single stalk. It finishes kind of like a sparkler, kind of like a fountain. And so those seed heads are very, very, very hard to actually photograph. But this whole area is so much earlier than any other area in the country, but I won't be going back there because it's not usable. The scripture does have something to say about the timing of the grapes in conjunction with the time of the barley and wheat harvest, but it's not any grapes that you can use anymore to tell the timing of that scripture. These days we have many hybridized grapes that can really pretty much produce grapes any time after the wheat's been gathered in until, goodness, the 7th month. But if you can find a vineyard with very old grapevines, such as this, let's see if I can blow this up. And see how big the trunks are. And this has not been pruned yet, but this is a very old vineyard. You could rely on the old vineyards in Israel to be a good indicator of the timing of when the grapes would have been ready in Israel. That's important because one of the 7 species, one of the 7 first fruits offerings is grapes. Not all grapes in Israel. You can't point at any little skinny old grapevine and say, look, the grapes are blooming. Oh gosh, it must be the season. No, those are new. Those are hybridized. They do something that the predecessors did not do. When someone tells you what the grapes are or are not doing, it should look like an old vineyard like this. Before we get to the barley over at the Jordan Valley checkpoint, I wanted to show you that I also today went and checked on how the flax was. Exodus 9:31 and 32 tells us the key to understanding exactly what is Abib. And so part of that equation is flax in bloom. And it's a long story. I've done this in other videos, but Elohim has provided us flax in the Galilee. Specific to the Galilee, we were the largest producer of flax to linen in the 1st century during the Roman occupation. And so the remnants of those grow here, and I wanted to see how the flax was doing. And as you can see from the photos you've been looking at, there's not even a bud on the flax plant yet. Apologies that this next section is not going to play like a video. I've tried playing it through Zoom and narrating. I've tried playing it through my video editor and narrating, but in both instances it comes out like mini still shots. So apologies, this is not what I had planned. It is what it is until I figure out what I need to do in a consecutive video at a later date. This next section is the video from the Jordan Valley checkpoint field. Let me share that video. Quite frankly, I don't know how to make this basically not boring. I mean, it's not boring to me. For example, I can see here barley heads, but over in here, I can see barley that's still coming out. So I'm just going to try to point some of this stuff out to you. This video is about 13 minutes long. We're going to go really fast. We're going to skim it. But I would really like for you to get a feeling. Do you see these little pokey sticks back here? Back here? Back here? These are barley that are just exiting the blade. The fruiting heads are just exiting the blade. So I really want to basically take you to the field with me. However, in camera, that's hard to do because the greens so blur together and my equipment is not high enough definition. And if it were, I probably wouldn't be able to upload it to YouTube easily. So we have some obstacles, even still in our day, that we need to overcome. But we're just going to let this run a while. All of this will be barley. It is not yet. I'm just feeling the head, how flexible it is. If it's flexible, it's not near ready to be Abib. All of this, you see all those pokey heads. This is barley that will be coming out very, very soon. And also, you will notice if the wind is not blowing, that this barley is standing very straight up when it's out right there, very straight up. Tells me there's no weight in that fruiting head. That as that fruiting head matures, when the wind is not blowing, now there's always a good breeze in this area. But when the wind is not blowing, those heads are standing straight up, as you see right here, straight up, and that means they are absolutely empty of any substance. This little blade right here, I'm showing you that the awns are coming up, that the fruiting head is in the process of exiting that plant, those little pokey hairs. Okay, that barley is in the process of exiting that plant. These areas that are mashed down, because of the way this looks, I will tell you it's wind. There are others that are really mashed flat that are where the deer have bedded for the night. But I don't perceive that since Sighted Moon has been in here, I don't perceive that there are other human trails in this tall wild barley. Now we're going to skip ahead a little bit because really the next section above here, we're getting out of a lot of the barley that is mature, and that's more barley that is not mature. Okay, let me go back here. So sorry. This area, stop this. This area right in here is at the current time the area of my focus, where I think that I need to focus my attention. All of this is a beautiful thick area of barley. And let it play some more. Most of the rest of it is barley interdispersed among other barley that's in the process of coming out. Fruiting heads are in the process of coming out. And sometimes, like this one, that's, whoops, let me let this play. Well, there'll be one further up there. Sometimes I'm showing you actually things that are not barley. We have another cereal grass that comes out at this time of year that has nothing to do with the biblical calendar, and you will find it interdispersed among the barley. Okay, so here we go. This area is plenty big enough to make a omer. And I'm just showing you along that domestic line with the barley and a pretty wide line. We have wild barley. Actually, I think this is sweet. I don't think it's barley, but along that field, we have a lot of wild barley. It comes way out and then it swings back in and heads over to the tree. This is more than enough to make a cohesive omer of barley, which I'm very thankful to see this. And of course, I'm looking at, let me go back here. It looks like, you know, when you're doing the camera, you really think you're showing something, but you have to be careful how fast you move. Okay, you can see very well here that this is all very new barley. That is all barley that's not got a fruiting head yet. And these heads are all standing straight up. That's the condition of most of this area. Now, I know Sighted Moon was here, maybe about, I think it was a month ago, pretty much. And they saw barley that they said would make Aviv. But if I'm guessing, what has happened in this field this year is the same thing we saw 2 years ago. Randy Cates and I were in this field. He was in Israel, and we were looking for Abib barley together. Joe Dumont did not come. And there had been barley that I really thought would make it to the point of being Aviv. This is some of that thick barley on in that area I had showed you earlier. But there had been barley in this field that was really set to be Abib. I mean, Abib, it was really mature. It really looked good. There wasn't a whole bunch of it. It was more kind of sparse. But I really thought it was going to be an early flush of barley. That is all coming just up out of the blade. All of that is nothing going on there. And let me just show you here real quick. This is barley in lots of other barley that has not exited the blade yet. So there's a lot of barley that's just coming out that has not bloomed yet. Okay, there you go. Those white flecks you saw over in there, that's barley out among a lot of barley that's not out. So anyway, Randy and I were in here and there had been an early flush, but then there had been a later rain that was not nearly as heavy as what we've gotten this year. And what had happened is this newer barley had overcome the first flush and it was buried deep in the later barley. And if I was guessing, that's probably what's happened to Sighted Moon's early sighting of barley. You see how this is like, this is barley that's just coming out, standing straight up amongst other barley that's not out. So we got to get over past these weeds now. There's more, these thistles, there's more barley on the other side of the tree. We'll just scoot up. See, this is part of that barley that came out of the edge of the field to our right that we looked at earlier. So this is really a pretty good swath here. So I would imagine that's brand new barley right there. It hasn't even had time to pick up color. I would imagine that what has happened with what they saw is it's there, but it's down in this new stuff and it's buried deep down in there, and there's just really no way to reach in there and get it. This is another tree. There's about 3 or 4 trees along the road in this wild barley. Okay, here's something I want to show you. If I can get up there. You have to be careful with your pictures because not all of this, though it looks like it, is barley. This right here is rather like the oats. It has a scattered head. It has a head that is not cohesive. That is not barley, but when you look from a distance, you can be confused about it. Let's see if I can show you the difference. That's that domestic field. This on the very edge of the domestic and the wild, this from a distance is what barley looks like. It doesn't look blurry, scattered, and sprinkled. So what you're seeing is the potential for an awful lot of barley to be ready at the same time in the very near future, but it is not ready yet. I did get some photos. That was oops. I did get some photos. See how this looks like one piece coming out from a distance. These look like one piece, and so that's something to watch for when you look at other videos. I did, and there's beautiful barley. I mean, it's not orderly like it was over by Pardes Hana, because this area gets a lot of wind, and this area is where the Jezreel Valley tees into the Jordan Valley. And so there's a lot of natural airflow. That airflow dries out the ground. I believe it's part of the reason that the barley is usually more mature here than in other parts of the country. Um, that's a diseased barley right there. I'm showing you the black one. But all of this plays into what happens to the barley in this area. And this barley really only goes around this tree right here and then back again. This up on the hill and the other side I'm showing you is not a thick field of barley like we're looking at. It becomes very sprinkled and sparse as you go towards that. So this is the condition of that area by the Jordan Valley checkpoint. See, that's beautiful. It's going to be beautiful barley, but it just doesn't have its head down. Even in the wind, its head's not down. And here I am. I come back through that one place and I try to pull a head of barley that I thought would have the best chance of being ready. And you're going to see there is not even water inside the seeds yet. So let's talk about water inside the seeds. Barley and coconuts have something in common. Before they put on the starch, they have endosperm. It's a liquid, and that liquid is used up making the starch. So in the beginning, you can have water in the barley heads, and they will cause the heads to bow. So you've always got to check the grain. But this little barley head had no endosperm and had absolutely what the Bible would call no meat or no starch at all. Probably a couple more things that I could tell you about. And that is from Yardina. And that is from Yardina. There was on Highway 90, because we're talking about going out to Bet Shean right now. On Highway 90 around Yardina, I saw a little bit of fruiting barley that was starting to grace the roadsides. And then from Kfar Reuben, of course, that early area up to the Bet Shean Junction on Highway 90, there was quite a substantial amount that was just really coming out just now. You can tell by, again, the posture of the heads and the color. And then when you approached Bet Shean on that corner, you take going into the city past the mall that's on the right, that field had just begun to have fruiting barley heads. Normally, what I see in this time of year, now I'm going to talk to you about what I normally see, not what I require. There's a huge difference between Exodus 9:31 and 32 and the ebb and flow of the land, because Elohim can adjust that ebb and flow, and it'll be just fine. But when he gives you something in scripture that you should look for, he usually doesn't adjust it. So I normally see when the barley is approaching that time of that we really need to start watching it. Bet Shean is an area that is covered up in wild arugula or wild rocket. And when it approaches that time, we really need to start watching the barley. It will be in full, tall, blooming heads. Well, rather like we saw with the flax earlier, the arugula, when I came through, was just starting to bloom. I'm talking to you about the ebb and flow of the land, not what I require. Huge difference. As well as the anemones are just starting to look tired. They're fully bloomed. The petals are fully extended and no longer touching. What happens in the ebb and flow of the land that I have noticed over the years is that as the anemones fade from the earth, the flax begins to bloom behind it. Are we there yet? No, we're not. We're close, but we're not. The other thing that I would tell you, let me check my notes. The other thing that I would tell you is there is an awful lot of oats out there. Oats are coming up first this year. The oats are not in the Bible, but the oats do come up. The wild oats do come up with the barley and the wheat. They all come up at the same time, general time usually. The oats will usually drop out if they've come up at the same time. If they've come up at the same time, sometimes they don't. If they come up at the same time, the oats will drop their grains first. And in this case, because the oats are out, I'm looking at them and they haven't dropped anything. They're very green. They're very new out of the earth. And so that means that we have had a lot of oats come up at the end of the year and ahead of the barley because wild oats love rain. They love it. They can't get enough of it. Whereas I have seen heavy rains almost drown the barley in years past. So those are just a few things that I've noticed, and I'm going to tell you my feeling of what the land is witnessing to us. It's not written in stone. We're still waiting to see what Elohim will perform. But my feeling when I look across the land right now is it presents more like the end of the 11th month course rather than the end of the 12th month because we're just now getting signs of fruiting barley heads. In years past, if I saw what I'm seeing right now on the land, I would feel, and I saw it at the end of the 11th month, I would feel pretty good about the fact that we're probably going to have barley we can look at, and barley for the first month because of the way the 11th month has presented in the past. Again, that's what I'm saying is what I'm seeing looks more like the end of an 11th month than the end of a normal 12th month. And I won't predict. I'm going to keep looking, but I'm talking to you about the rhythm and the flow of the earth. You see, it does matter if the flowers are blooming. It does matter what the migration of the birds are. Not that we require such things, but we know historically, not only me, but those who've been coming here longer than I have, that the barley will come after the earth starts dying, after the earth is bloomed, after the migratory birds have passed through this land when there's plenty of food on their way to Europe, have passed through this land and rested for a while. These are all signs and ebbs and flows of the season. Once again, I want to make this very, very, very clear. I do not require them, and I do not require them in a certain order. I do notice them. because I should be seeing an ebb and flow of life in the green season. Again, remembering that I've told you so many times that we have four, maybe this year, 5 months of green because it feels like the Father's doing a hard reset in the calendar. 4, maybe 5 months of green, and then we're going to die. Everything's going to go brown. The ground's going to be stripped. It's going to be crunchy, and there's not going to be seen any life on the earth until the next rains. So to see these things during this time that I call love and life, and I'll do a thing on that later, during this time that I call love and life, because that's what the scripture calls it, to acknowledge the season of love and life without requiring of it, just seeing what the Father is doing on the land is a normal process and an important process. The people who would say that this might be talking note ought to come in September and look for the barley. If these things are talking note, come when it's not raining and look for the barley. I mean, it's really that simple. That's actually a stupid idea, and everybody knows that. But to call all of the signs that the Father gives us of this season, of His season of love and life, talking out, is really a sad thing. Okay, I think that's all we need to talk about. But I will be. Yes, there's one more thing we need to talk about. What will I be doing from here? What I will be doing from here is I will be still looking for areas that right now have barley that can be considered. I won't do that past the 10th day of the month. I would like you to remember that I am one person doing this. I am here 12 months out of the year. The Father's given me ample time to observe what's going on. So it's not about time, it's about being one person. There is a possibility that at the last minute, a couple years ago that happened at the last minute at the 10th hour, okay, or the 10th day. Literally, I found barley in the condition of Abib that I had not seen before. And this is why I go to the 10th day looking for barley, the 10th day of what could possibly be the first month. And so that's what I will continue to do. My eyes will be open. I'll still be poking around, trying to determine if there's any other area I should go look at. But my focus as of now, without having found any other areas, will be that early area at the Jordan Valley checkpoint. I hope this helps. I've tried to be clear. So I hope that you have gained a little knowledge and you can see well enough to have understanding.